The cursor blinked accusingly at me in the darkness, the only light in my cramped Seattle apartment coming from the 3 monitors arranged in a semicircle around my makeshift desk. 2:47 a.m. I should have been in bed hours ago, but sleep had become a luxury I couldn't afford. Not when a single corporate security audit paid 3 months of rent. My fingers flew across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, navigating through layers of encrypted servers for what should have been a routine job. The coffee beside me had gone cold sometime around midnight, a bitter reminder of how long I'd been sitting in this uncomfortable secondhand chair. But the familiar ache in my lower back kept me focused. Pain meant I was alive, meant I was working, meant I was surviving in a city that chewed up and spat out people like me every single day. The rain hammered against my window, creating a rhythmic backdrop to the soft clicking of keys. Outside, Capitol Hill was silent, the streets washed clean by the relentless downpour that had started 3 days ago and showed no signs of stopping. I loved Seattle for its darkness, for the way the city seemed to close in on itself during these endless gray months, making it easy to disappear into the digital realm where I felt most at home. I'd been a freelance hacker for 6 years now, ever since dropping out of MIT during my junior year, when my father's medical bills had drained what little family savings we'd had. The degree hadn't mattered anyway. I'd learned more in online forums and through trial and error than I ever had in a classroom. My clients ranged from small startups worried about data breaches to corporations that needed someone willing to operate in the gray areas their official IT departments couldn't touch. Tonight's job was supposed to be simple. A real estate development company wanted me to test their network security before launching a new project. Standard penetration testing. Nothing I hadn't done 100 times before. But something felt off from the moment I'd gained access to their systems. The architecture was too complex, too deliberately obscure. Normal companies didn't use military-grade encryption for property records. Normal companies didn't have hidden partitions within hidden partitions, each one protected by algorithms that would take government supercomputers weeks to crack. I leaned forward, my curiosity overwhelming the voice of caution that had kept me out of serious trouble all these years. The partition practically screamed, "Look away," which naturally made it impossible for me to do anything but look closer. My fingers moved almost of their own accord, executing a series of commands that would either grant me access or trigger security measures that could trace back to my location. The progress bar crawled across my screen with agonizing slowness. 5%. 10%. I held my breath, watching the encryption crack layer by layer. 20%. The rain outside seemed to intensify, matching the racing of my heart. 50%. This was taking too long. I should abort. Wipe my tracks. Pretend I'd never seen this particular digital door. But I didn't. I never did. At 73%, the partition opened like a flower blooming in fast motion, revealing folders upon folders of documents that made my blood run cold. Spreadsheets, financial records, wire transfers, shell corporations with names that sounded legitimate until you realized they were all variations of the same pattern, designed to move money through so many layers that tracing it back to the source would be nearly impossible. Nearly. But not quite. I opened the first file with trembling hands. Seattle real estate deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Properties purchased through these shell companies, then sold to legitimate buyers at inflated prices. The money trail wound through banks in Moscow, Cyprus, Panama. The kind of laundering operation that required serious infrastructure, serious connections, serious danger. My throat went dry as I scrolled through transaction after transaction. Luxury condos on the waterfront, commercial buildings in the business district, entire apartment complexes in neighborhoods that were just beginning to gentrify. And threaded through it all, buried in the metadata and hidden notes, were names I recognized from local news broadcasts, city council members, planning commissioners, a state senator. This wasn't just money laundering. This was systematic corruption on a scale that made my head spin. I should have stopped there. Should have closed the files, erased my digital footprint, and pretended I'd found nothing but boring property records. Instead, I did what every part of my hacker instinct screamed was the worst possible decision. I copied everything. My external hard drive whirred to life as gigabytes of incriminating evidence transferred over. I encrypted the files 3 times, using different algorithms for each layer, then created decoy files that would trigger false flags if anyone tried to access them without the proper keys. My hands shook so badly I had to retype the passwords twice. The download took 47 minutes. I counted each one, watching the progress bar with the same horrified fascination you might watch a car crash unfolding in slow motion. When it finally completed, I initiated my standard security protocols, wiping logs and covering my tracks with the thoroughness that had kept me anonymous all these years. Only when the last trace of my presence had been erased did I allow myself to breathe. The apartment suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in on me like a coffin. I needed air. I needed to think. I needed to pretend, for just a few hours, that I was a normal 26-year-old woman who went for runs at dawn instead of uncovering criminal conspiracies. I changed into my running clothes with mechanical efficiency, tucking the encrypted drive into the hidden pocket I'd sewn into my leggings. Paranoid? Maybe. But paranoia had kept me alive and free in a profession where one mistake could mean prison, or worse. I grabbed my keys, phone, and earbuds, then paused at the door to look back at my apartment. The monitors glowed softly in the darkness, patient and waiting. My entire life was in this 600-square-foot space. Everything I owned, everything I'd worked for, concentrated in one vulnerable place. The thought made my chest tight, but I pushed it away. I was being ridiculous. No one knew what I'd found. No one even knew I existed. The pre-dawn streets of Capitol Hill were quiet, the rain having finally tapered off to a light mist that hung in the air like a curtain. My sneakers pounded the wet pavement in a steady rhythm, each step driving away the anxiety that had been building in my chest since I'd opened that first file. Running had always been my therapy, the one activity that shut down the constant processing of my mind and forced me to exist purely in my body. I didn't notice the black SUV parked across from my building, didn't see the way the driver straightened when I emerged, speaking rapidly into his phone in a language I wouldn't have understood anyway. Didn't register the second vehicle that fell into position 3 blocks behind me, maintaining just enough distance to avoid suspicion. The sky was beginning to lighten by the time I completed my usual 5-mile loop, the gray Seattle dawn washing the city in shades of silver and steel. I felt better, calmer, my earlier panic seeming overdramatic in the growing light. So I'd stumbled onto something big. So what? I had the files encrypted and secured. I could decide later what to do with them. Maybe contact a journalist. Maybe turn them over to the FBI. Maybe just keep them as insurance. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment, my legs pleasantly sore from the run. The hallway was empty, the building still asleep. My key turned in the lock with its familiar resistance, the mechanism needing oil like it had for the past 8 months. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. Monitors still glowing. Coffee cups still on the desk. The comforting clutter of my solitary life. I showered, letting hot water cascade over me until my skin turned pink and my thoughts grew foggy with exhaustion. When I finally crawled into bed as the sun rose over Puget Sound, I fell asleep within minutes, dreaming of nothing. While across the city, men with dead eyes studied my photograph and loaded their weapons. I woke to darkness and the sound of my apartment door splintering. For a split second, I thought I was still dreaming. But dreams didn't smell like rain and gun oil. Dreams didn't make your heart explode into terror so complete it paralyzed every muscle. I rolled from bed on pure instinct, reaching for the baseball bat I kept propped against my nightstand. My father's advice from years ago suddenly seeming less paranoid and more prophetic. The bedroom door burst open. 2 men in tactical gear, faces covered by black masks, moving with the practiced efficiency of professionals. I swung the bat with everything I had, connecting with the first man's knee. His scream was cut short by a suppressed gunshot from the hallway that dropped him instantly, his body crumpling to my floor like a puppet with cut strings. "Get down!" The command came in an accented voice. Italian, not Russian, as a third figure appeared in my doorway. I hit the floor as bullets shredded my bedroom wall, the sound deafening even through the suppressors. Plaster rained down on me like snow. My mind couldn't process what was happening fast enough. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Through the chaos, I glimpsed my savior. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with controlled violence that was somehow more terrifying than the chaos around him. Each shot precise and devastating. He wore an expensive suit that seemed absurdly pristine despite the carnage, and when he turned slightly, I saw his face in profile, sharp jawline, dark hair swept back, the kind of handsome that belonged in boardrooms, not firefights. The shooting lasted 47 seconds. I counted them, curled behind my bed with my hands clamped over my ears, every explosion of gunfire sending fresh waves of terror through me. When silence fell, it was somehow worse than the noise had been. My ears rang. The smell of cordite burned my nostrils. I couldn't stop shaking. Riley Thompson. Not a question. He stood over me, gun still raised but not pointing at me. His eyes were dark, assessing, calculating. "You have 30 seconds to grab what matters. They sent 6 men. I killed 3. The others will be here soon." "Who?" My voice came out as a croak. "Roman Castellano. Move. Now." Something in his tone cut through my paralysis. I moved. Laptop, hard drives. The encrypted USB I wore around my neck always, even when sleeping. A change of clothes shoved into my backpack with trembling hands. My fingers wouldn't cooperate properly, fumbling with zippers and clasps. Roman stood at my bedroom door, reloading with mechanical efficiency, listening to something through an earpiece I hadn't noticed before. His face betrayed nothing. No emotion. No fear. Just cold calculation. This was a man who had done this before. Many times before. 20 seconds, he said without looking at me. I grabbed my phone, then hesitated. My father's watch, the last thing I had of him. I snatched it from my dresser as Roman's hand closed around my arm. "Time's up." He pulled me through my destroyed apartment, stepping over the body in my hallway without breaking stride. The front door hung crooked on its hinges. The smell of blood mixed with the scent of rain from outside. My mind kept trying to reject what I was seeing, insisting this had to be a nightmare, had to be anything but real. The stairwell was dark, emergency lighting casting everything in hellish red. Roman moved like a shadow, one hand gripping my arm, the other holding his weapon ready. At the second-floor landing, he suddenly pushed me against the wall, his body shielding mine as footsteps echoed from below. I felt his heartbeat against my shoulder blade. Steady. Calm. Like this was just another Tuesday for him. The footsteps grew closer. Roman's grip on his gun tightened fractionally, the only sign of tension I could detect. A door opened on the first floor. The footsteps diverted. Roman waited 5 more seconds, then pulled me forward again, moving fast now, taking the remaining stairs 2 at a time while somehow keeping me from falling. We burst through the building's front entrance into the rain-soaked street where a black Mercedes idled at the curb, engine running, driver ready. "Get in the back," Roman ordered, opening the door and practically throwing me inside before sliding in beside me. "Drive." The car lurched forward before my door had fully closed. I fell against the leather seat, my backpack clutched to my chest like a shield. Through the rear window, I saw 3 men emerge from my building, weapons visible in their hands. One raised his gun, but we were already turning the corner, tires squealing on wet pavement. "Head down," Roman said, pushing me below the window line as bullets sparked off the car's armor. The driver, a bald man with prison tattoos crawling up his neck, made a sharp left turn that threw me against Roman's chest. He steadied me with one hand, still watching out the rear window with that same terrible calm. We drove in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. I couldn't stop shaking. Couldn't stop seeing that first man drop dead in my bedroom. Couldn't process that my entire life had just been erased in less than 5 minutes. "Are they gone?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. "For now." Roman holstered his weapon inside his jacket, then looked at me properly for the first time. His dark eyes traveled over my face, reading something there I couldn't name. "You know what you found, don't you? On the servers." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "The Bratva doesn't appreciate people digging into their business affairs," he continued. "Especially not people who copy their files onto encrypted drives." My hand went instinctively to the USB around my neck. "How did you—" "Because I've been tracking those servers for 6 months," he said, waiting for them to make a mistake. "Instead, you stumbled in and downloaded their entire operation in one night." Something that might have been admiration flickered across his face. Impressive. Stupid, but impressive. "I didn't know. Obviously." He pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. "If you had known, you would have run the moment you saw the encryption architecture. But you didn't. You were curious. And now the Russian mafia wants you dead, and I need what's on that drive." The car pulled into an underground parking garage, descending several levels into darkness. I had no idea where we were. No landmarks. No sense of direction. Just concrete and shadows, and the growing certainty that I'd traded one death sentence for another. The driver pulled into a spot near an elevator. Roman got out first, scanning the empty garage before gesturing for me to follow. My legs barely supported me as I climbed out, every muscle still locked in terror mode. "Where are we going?" I asked, as Roman pressed the elevator call button. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find you." The elevator arrived with a soft chime. "For now, at least. Whether you stay safe depends entirely on what happens next." The doors closed, sealing us in chrome and LED lighting. In the polished surface, I could see my reflection. Wild-eyed, pale, a stranger wearing my face. And beside her, a man who had just killed 3 people without breaking a sweat, who was now my only barrier between life and death. As the elevator climbed upward, carrying me toward an unknown fate, one thought echoed through my terrified mind. I should have looked away. When I saw that encryption, when I saw those files, I should have just looked away. But I never did. And now 12 hours of normal life were all I had left. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse apartment that made my entire building look like a storage unit. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the far wall, revealing a view of Elliott Bay that must have cost more than I'd earn in 10 lifetimes. The space was all clean lines and expensive materials: marble, hardwood, leather furniture that probably had Italian names I couldn't pronounce. But what struck me most was the silence. After the chaos of the last hour, the quiet felt almost aggressive. Roman moved through the space with the ease of ownership, shrugging off his jacket to reveal a shoulder holster that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. He draped the jacket over a chair, then gestured toward a hallway branching off the main living area. "Guest room is second door on the left. Bathroom attached. You'll find clothes in the closet that should fit." He checked his phone, frowning at whatever message appeared there. "Stay away from the windows. Don't try to leave. Don't use your phone or laptop to contact anyone. Those rules aren't suggestions." "Am I a prisoner?" The question came out steadier than I felt. His dark eyes met mine, and something in their depths made my breath catch. Not quite amusement. Not quite threat. Something in between that felt more dangerous than either. "You're alive. Let's start there and see how the rest plays out." He disappeared through another doorway, phone already to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian. I stood frozen in the middle of his living room, my backpack still clutched against my chest, trying to process the last 2 hours of my life. 2 hours ago, I'd been asleep in my own bed. Normal. Safe. Now I was in a stranger's penthouse, having watched people die, with the Russian mafia hunting me. The shaking started again. I made it to the guest room before my legs gave out, sinking onto a bed that probably cost more than my car. The room was beautiful in an impersonal way. Everything matching, nothing personal, like a high-end hotel suite. Through the attached bathroom door, I could see marble countertops and a shower with enough jets to qualify as a car wash. I set my backpack down carefully, then pulled out my laptop and hard drives. My hands trembled as I checked each one, relieved to find no obvious damage. The USB around my neck felt heavier than its physical weight, like it had gained mass with each piece of incriminating evidence stored on it. This was what they wanted. This tiny piece of plastic and circuitry that contained enough information to dismantle a criminal empire. And Roman wanted it too. He'd said as much in the car. But the question was, what would he do to get it? The shower called to me. I smelled like fear and cordite, my clothes soaked with rain and spotted with plaster dust. But stripping naked in a stranger's apartment, especially a stranger who'd just killed 3 men, felt like a vulnerability too far. Instead, I splashed water on my face at the sink, avoiding my own reflection in the mirror. When I emerged from the guest room 20 minutes later, Roman was standing at those massive windows, phone still pressed to his ear. Dawn was breaking over the water, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscene after the violence of the night. He'd changed into fresh clothes, dark jeans and a black sweater that did nothing to soften the threat he represented. "Yes," he said into the phone, his voice cold. "All 3. No, she's here, secured." A pause. "The drive is encrypted. We'll need time." Another pause, longer this time. His jaw tightened. "I understand. 48 hours. He ended the call and turned to face me. In the growing light, I could see details I'd missed before. A thin scar above his left eyebrow, the shadow of exhaustion under his eyes, the way he moved with the careful control of someone always ready for violence. "Coffee?" he asked, as casually as if we were colleagues meeting for a morning briefing. "Who are you talking to?" I countered. "People who want what you have." He walked to the kitchen, an expanse of black granite and stainless steel that looked barely used. "The question is whether they get it from you willingly or from your corpse. I'm voting for the former, if only because it's less messy." "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "It's supposed to make you understand your situation." He started an espresso machine that probably cost more than my entire kitchen setup. "You stumbled into the middle of a war, Riley. The Bratva has been using Seattle real estate to launder money from their operations across the Pacific Northwest. Drugs, weapons, human trafficking, the whole ugly catalog. They've bought half the city's government in the process." "And you?" I asked, watching him work. "What's your stake in this?" "Let's say I have a vested interest in seeing the Russian mafia's operations in this city dismantled." He poured espresso into 2 small cups, adding sugar to one before sliding it across the counter to me. "My family has been trying to document their network for 18 months. You did it in one night." I didn't touch the coffee. "Your family. Your mafia, too. Italian, not Russian. Important distinction." He took a sip of his espresso, completely unbothered by my horror. "We operate in the same world, but we have different rules, different codes. The Bratva is chaos and brutality. We're more structured. You killed 3 people in my apartment." "I saved your life in your apartment," he corrected. "Those men were there to put a bullet in your head and burn the building down to destroy any evidence. I interrupted that plan." The espresso cup rattled slightly when I finally picked it up, betraying my trembling hands. The coffee was perfect, Rich and strong and exactly what I needed. I hated that even his coffee was perfect. Why? Because you have something I need, and because... He hesitated, a crack in that cold facade. Because leaving you to die wasn't an option. How noble, I said, the sarcasm a thin shield against my fear. Don't mistake practicality for nobility. He finished his espresso, then moved back to those massive windows. The men who came for you were Bratva soldiers, low-level, expendable. When they don't report back, the organization will send others, better trained, more careful. They'll check your known associates, your family, anywhere you might run. My stomach dropped. My father is in a care facility in Spokane, I know. We've already arranged for additional security. He won't even notice the extra staff. Roman glanced at me over his shoulder. I told you, Riley, I've been tracking this operation for months. That includes tracking anyone who got too close to it. You've been watching me. The violation of it hit me like a physical blow. How long? Since you first accessed those servers 3 months ago. 3 months. He'd been in my life, watching me, for 3 months without me knowing. Every run through Capitol Hill. Every late night at my desk. Every moment I'd thought I was alone and safe. You son of a bitch. Probably, he agreed without heat, but a son of a bitch who kept you alive until last night, when you decided to copy their entire operation and trigger every alarm they had. I wanted to throw the espresso cup at his head, wanted to scream, wanted to be anywhere but in this beautiful prison with this dangerous man who'd invaded my life so completely. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. What happens now? Now you give me access to those files. My people will analyze them, identify key players, build a case that can actually bring the Bratva down. He turned to face me fully. Then we negotiate your safety. And if I refuse, then you walk out that door and see how long you last. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went cold. The Bratva has resources you can't imagine. They'll find you in hours, maybe days if you're smart. And when they do, they won't just kill you. They'll make you tell them everywhere you sent copies of those files, everyone you spoke to about what you found. It won't be quick. The espresso turned to acid in my stomach. You're saying I have no choice. I'm saying you have exactly 2 choices. Trust me or trust yourself. He moved closer, each step deliberate. I know which one gives you better odds. He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could smell that expensive cologne again, see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Close enough to be threatening without touching me. I'm not asking you to like me, Riley. I'm asking you to be smart. You're good with computers. Be good with self-preservation too. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run. But he was right about one thing. I wouldn't last long on my own. Not against an organization with the resources and reach he'd described. And something in the way he looked at me, that strange intensity, suggested he was telling the truth about one thing at least. He didn't want me dead. The files are encrypted, I said finally. Triple layered. Even with the passwords, it would take days to decrypt everything properly. Then we have days. He stepped back, giving me space to breathe again. My people are experts. They'll work with whatever you can give them. And what do I do while they're working? You stay here. You stay safe. You let me figure out how to end this without everyone dying. He pulled out his phone again, checking something. I have to go handle some things. Luca will be here, my driver from earlier. He'll make sure you have everything you need. I'm really a prisoner then. You're protected. He grabbed his jacket from the chair. There's food in the kitchen, entertainment systems in the living room, books in the office. Internet access is locked down to approved sites only. Don't bother trying to bypass it. I'll know. Of course you will. Something that might have been humor flickered across his face. I like you, Riley. You've got spine. Most people who've seen what you've seen in the last few hours would be catatonic right now. You're pissed off and planning your next move. That's good. That's survivable. He moved toward the elevator, then paused at the threshold. One more thing. Don't try to be a hero. Don't contact the police or the FBI or anyone else you think might help. The Bratva has people everywhere. The corruption you found? That's just the tip. You make a call to the wrong person, and we're both dead before sunrise. The elevator doors closed on him before I could respond, leaving me alone in his pristine fortress. I stood there for a long moment, the empty espresso cup still in my hand, trying to decide if I'd just made a deal with the devil or found the only person capable of keeping me alive. Through the windows, Seattle woke up to another gray morning, completely unaware that somewhere in its depths, a war was being fought over files sitting encrypted in my backpack. A war that had crashed into my life with the violence of a gunfight in my bedroom and the strange, terrible certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. I walked back to the guest room and opened my laptop. The login screen glowed in the dim light, password protected with algorithms. Even I would have trouble cracking without the right keys. All that information. All those names and numbers and evidence of crimes that reached into the highest levels of the city. Roman wanted it. The Bratva wanted it destroyed. The FBI would probably want it too, if they could be trusted. And I was stuck in the middle, protected by a man who admitted to being a criminal himself, who'd killed without hesitation, who'd been watching me for months. I should have been terrified. I was terrified. But underneath the fear was something else, something that felt dangerously like curiosity. Who was Roman Castellano really? Why had he been tracking the Bratva for 18 months? What did he stand to gain from bringing them down? And why, when he'd looked at me in the darkness of my destroyed bedroom, had I seen something in his eyes that looked almost like recognition? Like he'd known me, really known me in that moment of chaos and violence? I closed the laptop without logging in. Not yet. Not until I understood the game I was playing and who all the players were. Roman thought he held all the cards, but he'd underestimated one thing. I hadn't survived 6 years as a hacker by trusting people at face value. If I was going to be trapped in this golden cage, I was going to learn everything I could about the man who'd put me here. And then, I was going to decide if Roman Castellano was my salvation, or just another kind of danger. The sun continued its rise over Elliott Bay, indifferent to human struggles. Somewhere in the city, people were waking up to normal lives. Coffee and commutes and the comfortable illusion of safety. I envied them that illusion, even as I knew I could never return to it. The door to the cage had closed, but I was still breathing, still thinking, still fighting, and that would have to be enough. 3 days in Roman's fortress, and I'd learned more about my captor than he probably intended. The man was meticulous to the point of obsession, his apartment organized with military precision, every item in its designated place, every surface immaculate. He left each morning at 7, returned around 6 in the evening, and spent at least 2 hours on his laptop in the office adjacent to the living room, door closed but not locked. Luca, the tattooed driver who'd become my primary jailer, was less meticulous but more observant. He watched me with the wariness of someone who'd seen people try to run before and knew all the tricks. He brought meals from restaurants whose names I recognized from magazine spreads, Italian, mostly, but also Japanese, French, Thai. As if expensive food could somehow compensate for the bars on my cage, invisible though they were. I spent my time methodically exploring the penthouse's security systems. Not to escape. I wasn't stupid enough to think I'd survive an hour on the streets with the Bratva hunting me, but because understanding your prison was the first step to gaining any power within it. The windows were bulletproof, I'd discovered, testing them with a wine glass when Luca was in the kitchen. The elevator required a keycard and thumbprint. The internet connection routed through enough proxies and firewalls that even I couldn't trace it back to a physical location. Roman had built himself a fortress in the sky, and I was trapped at its center. On the fourth morning, everything changed. I was working on my laptop, not the encrypted files, but a freelance project I'd been neglecting, something to keep my mind occupied, when Roman emerged from his bedroom earlier than usual. He looked different, tired. The careful control he usually wore like armor had slipped slightly, revealing something raw underneath. "We need to talk," he said, pouring himself coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. "About what happens next." I closed my laptop slowly, every nerve suddenly alert. "I'm listening." He sat across from me at the dining table, the morning light casting his face in sharp relief. Up close, I could see he hadn't slept well. Maybe hadn't slept at all. "My analysts have been reviewing the files you gave them. The information is extensive, more than we hoped for. Names, accounts, transactions going back 5 years. But there's a problem. There's always a problem. The Bratva knows you copied their files. They're systematically eliminating anyone who might have helped you." He pulled out his phone, sliding it across the table. On the screen was a news article. "Recognize this woman?" My blood went cold. Sarah Chen, the IT contractor who'd helped me set up my security protocols 2 years ago. The article was dated yesterday, found dead in her apartment. Apparent suicide, pending investigation. "She didn't kill herself," I whispered. "No, she didn't." Roman took the phone back. "There have been 3 others in the past 72 hours. People you've worked with, people you've contacted recently, people whose names appeared in your email or phone records. The Bratva is sending a message. Anyone connected to you is a liability." My hands clenched into fists on the table. "You said my father was protected." "He is. 24-hour security, all my people. But I can't protect everyone you've ever known, Riley. The organization has resources even I can't match." He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "Which brings us to the negotiation." "What negotiation?" "The one where we both get what we want and stay alive in the process." He stood, moving to the windows as if the view helped him think. "The files you have are valuable, evidence that could bring down the Bratva's entire West Coast operation. But evidence alone isn't enough. We need leverage, something that makes them more afraid of what happens if they keep coming after you than if they leave you alone." "And what would that be?" "Mutually assured destruction." He turned to face me. "We release the files publicly. Not to law enforcement, they're too compromised. To the media. Every news outlet simultaneously. Make it impossible to suppress or contain. The Bratva's network collapses. Their political connections get exposed. Their money trail goes public." "That would start a war," I said slowly. "It would end one." His jaw tightened. "The Bratva has been expanding into territory my family has held for 3 generations. Buying politicians we've had arrangements with, undercutting our legitimate businesses with their blood money. This isn't just about you anymore, Riley. This is about taking back what's ours." There it was, the real reason he'd saved me. Not nobility or mercy, but cold calculation. I was a weapon he could use against his enemies. The files I'd stumbled onto were ammunition in a war I hadn't known existed. "What do I get out of this?" I asked. "Besides staying alive?" "Protection. Real protection, not just hiding in a penthouse." He moved closer, his presence overwhelming even from across the room. "My family is powerful, Riley. We have resources, connections, reach that extends across the country. You work with us, and you disappear properly. New identity, new city, financial security, a life where you don't have to hack corporate servers at 3 a.m. to make rent. You've been watching me longer than 3 months, haven't you?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I've been watching you for 8 months, Since you cracked the security on one of our subsidiary companies and left a note in the server logs telling us our encryption was embarrassingly outdated. I remembered that job. A real estate holding company that had hired me to test their systems. I'd left my signature, a text file buried in their logs with suggestions for improvement. Standard practice for me. A calling card that sometimes led to repeat business. That was yours? One of many. He sat back down across from me, close enough now that I could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. You impressed me. Most hackers would have exploited the vulnerabilities. You documented them and moved on. Professional, clean. Exactly the kind of person I needed to find the Bratva's digital trail. So you used me. The words came out bitter. I gave you access. His voice was low, intense. Every server you've penetrated in the last 8 months, every corporate network you've tested. I made sure you got those jobs. Made sure you had the clearance to dig as deep as you needed. Yes, I used you. But I also kept you safe until you decided to download half the Russian mafia's secrets in one night. The manipulation of it should have enraged me. Would have, if not for the exhaustion settling into my bones. 8 months. My entire recent career had been orchestrated by the man sitting across from me, guiding me toward this exact moment. Why me? I asked. There are hackers more skilled, better connected. Why go through all this effort? Something shifted in his expression. Not quite vulnerability, but close. Because you're smart enough to find what I needed, moral enough not to sell it to the highest bidder, and isolated enough that no one would notice if you disappeared. He paused. And because when I first saw you, really saw you, not just your digital footprint, I knew you were someone worth saving. The intensity of his gaze made my breath catch. This was dangerous territory, more dangerous than the Bratva, or the files, or any of the violence that had brought me here. This was the moment where captor became something else, where the lines between protection and possession started to blur. When did you see me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. 4 months ago. You were running through Capitol Hill at dawn, earbuds in, completely unaware of your surroundings. Anyone could have taken you. His hand moved across the table, not quite touching mine, but close enough that I felt the heat of his skin. I had Luca follow you home, made sure you got there safely, started doing it every morning you ran. The revelation sent chills down my spine. Those runs had been my sanctuary, my escape from the isolation of my life. And all along, he'd been there. Watching, protecting, obsessing. That's insane, I said. That's survival. He finally closed the distance, his fingers brushing mine. The touch was electric, sending shockwaves through my nervous system. In my world, you protect what's valuable. You were valuable long before you found those files, Riley. You just didn't know it yet. I should have pulled away, should have recognized the possessiveness in his words for the red flag it was. Instead, I found myself frozen, caught between fear and something that felt dangerously like attraction. Roman Castellano was a criminal, a killer, a man who'd manipulated my life for months without my knowledge. But he was also the only thing standing between me and death. Show me, I said suddenly. If you want me to trust you, show me who you really are. Not the version you present to your enemies or even your allies. The real you. He studied me for a long moment, something unreadable flickering across his face. Then he stood, offering his hand. Come with me. I took his hand, warm, calloused, steady, and let him lead me through the penthouse to the office I'd only glimpsed before. He unlocked it with a thumbprint scanner, then gestured me inside. The room was smaller than I'd expected, lined with bookshelves that held everything from leather-bound classics to contemporary fiction. But what caught my attention was the wall behind his desk. Photographs, dozens of them, arranged in a careful pattern that told a story. A woman with dark hair and Roman's eyes, laughing at something off camera. A man in an expensive suit, hand on a young boy's shoulder. Roman, maybe 10 years old, trying to look serious. The same woman in a hospital bed, rail-thin and exhausted, but smiling. The man again, older now, at a funeral standing between teenage Roman and an older girl. "My mother," Roman said quietly, coming to stand beside me. "She died when I was 15. Cancer. It took 2 years, and we watched her fade a little more each day." His voice was carefully neutral, but I heard the pain underneath. "My father tried everything, every treatment, every specialist. Spent millions trying to save her. Nothing worked." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. The Bratva was expanding into Seattle then. They approached my father, offered him a partnership. He refused. Traditional families don't work with the Russians. Different codes, different values. Roman touched the photograph of his father gently. "They killed him 6 months after my mother died. Made it look like a heart attack, but we knew. Everyone knew." The pieces started falling into place. This isn't just about territory. It's personal. Everything is personal. He turned to face me fully, and I saw grief there, old and deep and never fully healed. My sister, Angela, in that photo, runs the legitimate side of our operations now. Hotels, restaurants, construction. I handle everything else. The things that keep us safe in a world where weakness gets you killed. "The things like murder," I said, not quite a question. "The things like justice." His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. "I won't apologize for what I am, Riley. I was raised in this world, trained for it. My father made me promise, before he died, that I would protect the family, protect what we'd built. I've kept that promise." The touch should have terrified me. Instead, it grounded me, made everything else fade until there was just this moment, this man, this terrible intimacy. "You want to use me to destroy them," I said. "I want to use what you found to finish what they started when they killed my father." His other hand joined the first, framing my face. "But I also want to keep you safe. Both things can be true. And after, when the files are released and the Bratva is destroyed, what happens to me? That depends on what you want." He leaned closer, his breath warm against my lips. "You could disappear. New life, new identity, freedom to be anyone you choose. Or you could stay." The words were barely audible. "With me. Not as a prisoner or a tool, but as someone I choose to protect because I want to, not because I have to." The implications hung in the air between us, heavy with possibility and danger. Roman Castellano was offering me a choice, but both options led into darkness. Freedom meant isolation, always running, always afraid. Staying meant entering his world fully, accepting the violence and corruption that came with it. But staying also meant never being alone again, never being vulnerable, having someone powerful choose to stand between me and every threat. "I need time," I said finally. "To think." He nodded, stepping back and giving me space. The loss of his touch was immediate and unsettling. "Take all the time you need, but know this, the clock is running. The Bratva won't stop hunting you. Every day we wait is another day they get closer." "How close?" "Close enough that I've doubled security. Close enough that we need to make a decision soon." He moved to his desk, pulling out a folder. "These are the arrangements for your father. Round-the-clock protection, the best medical care, financial security regardless of what you choose. That's not contingent on your cooperation. That's already done." I took the folder with trembling hands, opening it to find documents detailing exactly what he'd promised. My father's care facility now had 4 additional staff members, all former military, all on Roman's payroll. His medical bills were paid in full. A trust had been established for his ongoing care. "Why?" I asked, looking up at him. "Because you care about him, and because people I care about don't watch their loved ones suffer." The simple statement carried more weight than any declaration. Make your choice, Riley, but make it knowing I've already made mine. He left me alone in his office, surrounded by photographs of the family he'd lost and the evidence of the man he'd become in their absence. A man who killed without hesitation but set up trust funds for strangers' fathers, who manipulated and controlled but also protected with terrifying intensity. A man who looked at me like I was something precious and dangerous all at once. I stayed in that office for hours, studying the photographs, reading the documents, trying to understand the world I'd stumbled into. Trying to understand my own heart, which was doing something complicated and terrifying in response to Roman's revelation. By the time I emerged, the sun had set over Elliott Bay, turning the water to molten gold. Roman was at the windows again, always at those windows, watching his city like a king surveying his kingdom. He didn't turn when I approached, but I saw his shoulders tense slightly. "I'll help you," I said. "With the files, with destroying the Bratva, but I have conditions." "Name them." "Complete transparency. No more watching me without my knowledge, no more manipulation. If we're partners in this, we're equals." "Agreed." "And after it's done, I choose. Not you, not circumstances. I decide if I stay or go." He finally turned to face me, and something in his expression made my heart stutter. Not relief, though that was there. Something deeper. Something that looked almost like hope. "Agreed," he said. "But know this. I'm going to do everything in my power to make you want to stay." The promise in his words was both threat and seduction. Roman Castellano had decided I was his to protect, his to keep. And somewhere in the chaos of the last 4 days, I'd started wondering if maybe that wasn't the prison I'd thought it was. Maybe it was something else entirely. The plan took shape over the next week with military precision. Roman's analysts worked around the clock, cross-referencing the files I'd decrypted with their own intelligence. Names emerged from the data like ghosts materializing. Not just the Russian operatives we'd expected, but city officials, port authorities, even 2 federal judges. The corruption ran deeper than anyone had imagined, roots spreading through Seattle's infrastructure like poison through veins. I worked alongside them, my laptop set up in Roman's office, translating raw data into usable evidence. It felt strange, sitting in the same room where he conducted his own business, our lives overlapping in ways that grew more comfortable each day. He'd bring me coffee without asking, the perfect amount of sugar already added. I'd leave notes in his files when I found inconsistencies, little digital breadcrumbs that made him smile when he discovered them. The intimacy of it terrified me more than the violence had. Luca noticed the shift before I fully acknowledged it myself. "You're different with him," he observed one afternoon while Roman was out meeting with his sister. We were in the kitchen, and he was teaching me how to make proper Italian espresso, a gesture that felt absurdly domestic given the circumstances. "Different how?" I asked, watching the dark liquid stream into the small cup. "Softer, less like a cornered animal." He glanced at me, his scarred face surprisingly gentle. "Boss is different too. Haven't seen him this, present in years. Usually he's all calculation, no feeling. But with you, he feels things. That should probably scare me." "Probably," Luca agreed. "But you're not scared, not of him anyway." He was right. Somewhere between the negotiations and the long nights working side by side, my fear of Roman had transformed into something else. Understanding, maybe. or recognition of a kindred spirit. Someone else who'd learned to survive in spaces between light and darkness. The external threat, however, remained visceral and real. On the 8th day, Roman came home with blood on his collar. Not his own, he assured me quickly when I froze at the sight. But the message was clear. The Bratva was getting desperate, making moves that forced Roman's hand. 2 of their mid-level operators had been found dead in a shipping container at the port. Roman's doing, though he didn't say so explicitly. Retaliation for Sarah Chen and the others they'd killed. "It's escalating," I said, helping him out of his jacket in the entryway. My hands shook slightly as I hung it in the closet, careful not to touch the stained collar. "It has to." He loosened his tie, exhaustion evident in every movement. "We're backing them into a corner. Cornered animals fight back. How long until we release the files?" 72 hours. My sister is coordinating with journalists we trust, people who can't be bought or intimidated. Once the story breaks, there's no containing it. He moved to the windows, his constant refuge. After that, either the Bratva collapses under the exposure, or they come at us with everything they have. Us. The word hung between us, heavy with implications. He turned to look at me, and something in his gaze made my breath catch. "Yes, us. You're not a bystander anymore, Riley. You're part of this. Part of." He trailed off, seeming to struggle with words for the first time since I'd known him. "Part of my life, if you'll have it." The vulnerability in his admission cracked something open inside me. This man who killed without hesitation, who controlled an empire built on violence and power, was standing in front of me offering something that looked dangerously like his heart. I crossed the space between us before I could overthink it, standing close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "I'm terrified," I admitted. "Of the Bratva, of what happens after. Of this thing between us that I don't have a name for." His hand came up to cup my face, the gesture now familiar. "Name it whatever you want, but know that I've never felt this way about anyone. Never wanted to protect someone the way I want to protect you. Never needed someone the way I need you." "Need me for what?" "Everything." The word was barely a whisper before his lips met mine. The kiss was nothing like I'd imagined. Not aggressive or demanding, but achingly tender, as if I was something precious he was afraid of breaking. His hands cradled my face with devastating gentleness, and when I responded, pressing closer, I felt the tremor that ran through him. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, the world had shifted on its axis. There was no going back from this moment. No pretending we were just allies of convenience. Whatever this was between us, obsession, protection, something that might grow into love if given time, it had been acknowledged, made real. "Riley," he said my name like a prayer. "If you want me to stop, I don't." The certainty in my voice surprised us both. "I don't want you to stop." What happened next unfolded with the inevitability of a storm finally breaking. He kissed me again, deeper this time, walking me backward until my legs hit the edge of the couch. We sank down together, hands exploring with urgent need, months of tension finally finding release. His touch was reverent, mapping every curve and plane of my body as if committing me to memory. When he paused, silently asking permission, I nodded. Words felt inadequate for what was happening between us, this surrender that was also a claiming, this vulnerability that was also power. Later, tangled together on the couch with the city lights twinkling beyond the windows, I traced the scars on his chest. Evidence of a violent life, survival carved into skin. He caught my hand, bringing it to his lips. "No regrets?" he asked quietly. "Ask me again when the Bratva isn't trying to kill us," I said, but there was no heat in it, only honesty. He smiled, A real smile. Not the cold mask he wore for the rest of the world. Fair enough. We stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other and the temporary peace we'd created. Outside, danger waited. Inside, for these stolen moments, there was only us. One in the next morning brought both clarity and chaos. I woke alone in Roman's bed. He'd carried me there sometime in the night, tucking me under sheets that smelled like his cologne. Voices drifted from the living room, low and urgent. I dressed quickly in clothes he'd left folded on a chair and emerged to find Roman, Luca, and a woman I recognized from the office photographs. Angela Castellano had her brother's eyes and their mother's elegant bone structure. She looked up when I entered, assessing me with the sharp gaze of someone used to evaluating threats. "So this is the hacker who's turned my careful brother into someone reckless," she said, not unkindly. "Angela," Roman's voice carried a warning. "I'm just observing." She stood, offering her hand. "Angela Castellano. I run the family's legitimate operations, which means I clean up after my brother's less legitimate activities." I shook her hand, noting the strength in her grip. "Riley Thompson. I stumbled into your brother's life by accident. No accident lasts this long." She glanced between us, and something knowing flickered across her face. "But that's not why I'm here. We have a problem." Roman's expression hardened. "What kind of problem?" "The kind where the Bratva figured out where Riley's father is being cared for." Angela pulled out her phone, showing us security footage. "They sent 3 men last night. Our people intercepted them, but it was close. Too close." Ice flooded my veins. "Is he okay?" "My father. He's fine. Doesn't even know anything happened." She pocketed her phone. "But they're getting bolder, more desperate. The file release is scheduled for tomorrow night. I don't think we have that long." Roman's jaw tightened. "Move him. Take him to the estate in Oregon. Full security detail." "Already done. He's en route as we speak." Angela turned to me. "Your father will be safer there than anywhere in the city. The estate is isolated, defensible. But Riley—" "I know," I said before she could finish. "I'm the target. As long as I'm here, everyone around me is at risk." "Which is why you're going to Oregon too," Roman said, his tone brooking no argument. "Both of you. Today." "And you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I stay. Finish this." He moved closer, taking my hands. The moment those files go public, the Bratva's attention shifts to damage control. Their operations collapse. Their political protection evaporates. But until then, you're the one piece of evidence they desperately need to destroy. "So you're using me as bait while I'm locked away?" The bitterness surprised me. "I'm keeping you alive while I end the threat." His grip tightened. "This was always the plan, Riley. You knew that." The plan didn't include. I gestured between us, unable to articulate what had changed. "This." "No," he agreed softly. "It didn't. But that doesn't change what needs to happen. You go to Oregon, you stay safe, and when this is over, I come find you. And if you don't come back?" Something fierce flashed in his eyes. "I will. I have too much to live for now." Angela cleared her throat. "We need to leave in 30 minutes. Pack light, bring what matters. Luca will drive you both." The next half hour passed in a blur. I threw essentials into a bag while Roman made calls, coordinating security and finalizing the file release. When it was time to leave, he pulled me aside in the entryway, away from Angela's knowing gaze. "There's something you need to know," he said, reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a small box, flipping it open to reveal a thumb drive. "This is a complete copy of everything. The original files, plus my family's intel, plus something else." "What else?" "Documentation of my own operations. Everything I've done, everyone I've worked with, every gray area I've operated in." His voice was steady, but his eyes held something like fear. If something happens to me, if this goes wrong, you'll have everything you need to protect yourself. Leverage against my own people if necessary. The weight of what he was offering hit me like a physical blow. Roman, I'm trusting you with my life, Riley, with my family's lives, because I need you to understand. You're not just someone I'm protecting. You're someone I'm choosing. Completely. Whatever the cost. I closed his hand around the drive, pushing it back toward him. Then don't give me this. Don't plan for failure. Just come back to me. He kissed me then, deep and desperate, pouring months of want and fear, and something that felt like love into that single moment. When he finally pulled away, his forehead rested against mine. I'll come back, he promised. I swear it. The Oregon estate was a fortress disguised as a luxury compound. 30 acres of forest and high walls. The main house a sprawling modern structure with sightlines that would make a military tactician weep with joy. My father was already settled in a ground-floor suite, confused but comfortable. His dementia advanced enough that he didn't question the sudden change. I spent the first day restless, pacing the house like a caged animal. Angela worked from a home office, coordinating the file release with the precision of a general planning a campaign. That night, at exactly midnight, the story broke. Every major news outlet simultaneously. The Seattle Times, the Post-Intelligencer, CNN, the Washington Post. All running identical stories backed by undeniable evidence. The Bratva's money laundering operation, the corrupted officials, the trail of violence and extortion. My files, exposed to the world. Angela and I watched the coverage in the main living room, the massive TV displaying talking heads discussing the biggest corruption scandal in Pacific Northwest history. My phone, a secure burner Roman had given me, stayed silent. No calls, no texts, just static as the world exploded, and I had no way of knowing if he was alive or dead. The waiting was torture. Hours crawled past. Morning came. The news coverage intensified. Federal agents raiding properties across Seattle. Mass arrests. The mayor holding a press conference, face ashen. The 2 federal judges resigning. Everything Roman had planned unfolding with mathematical precision. But still no word from him. He's fine, Angela said, finding me at the window for the dozenth time. Roman doesn't lose. Everyone loses eventually. Not my brother. She stood beside me, looking out at the forest. He's been preparing for this his entire adult life. The Bratva killed our father, tried to destroy our family. Roman made himself into exactly the kind of man who could destroy them in return. He won't stop until it's finished. And what if finishing it kills him? Then he dies, knowing he protected what mattered. She glanced at me. Including you. The phone finally rang at 6:47 p.m., 36 hours after the files dropped. Roman's name on the screen. I answered before the first ring finished. Riley. His voice was rough, exhausted, but alive. So beautifully alive. It's done. The relief nearly buckled my knees. Are you okay? I'm fine, tired. There was some cleanup necessary, but it's handled. A pause. The Bratva's Seattle operations are finished. Key players are dead or in custody. The survivors are scattered. You're safe. When are you coming here? Another pause, longer this time. That's what I need to talk to you about. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? The fallout from this is massive. Federal investigations, territorial disputes with what's left of the Bratva's network, power vacuums that need filling. I have to stay in Seattle, rebuild, consolidate, make sure what we accomplish doesn't collapse. His voice softened. It could take months, Riley. Maybe longer. So I just stay here? Locked away while you fix everything? Or you come back? To the city? To the penthouse. To me. The weight of the offer was obvious. But if you come back knowing what my life is. The danger, the violence, the constant calculation. There's no pretending it's something else. This was it. The choice he'd promised me. Stay in Oregon, safe and isolated. Eventually getting my new identity and disappearing into a normal life. Or return to Seattle, to Roman, to a world where danger was constant, but I'd never be alone again. There's something you should know, I said slowly. While you were gone, I decrypted another layer of the Bratva files. Something I'd missed before. What did you find? Evidence that they've been planning something bigger. An expansion into California, partnerships with cartels across the border. The Seattle operation was just the beginning. I took a deep breath. You need someone who can track their digital footprint. Someone who can find their next move before they make it. Riley. I'm not asking for permission, Roman. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. My voice was steady, certain. I'm coming back. Not because you're protecting me, but because I'm choosing to fight alongside you. As an equal. As a partner. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the connection had dropped. Then finally, when can you be ready to leave? I'm already packed. His laugh was surprised and genuine. Of course you are. Luca will bring you back tomorrow. And Riley? Yes, I love you. The words were simple, devastating, true. I should have said it before. Should have said it a dozen times. But I'm saying it now. I love you. Tears pricked my eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. I love you too. God help me, but I do. Then come home. To me. To us. To whatever we build from here. I spent my last night in Oregon sitting with my father. He didn't recognize me. Hadn't for months. But I held his hand and told him everything anyway. About the danger I'd stumbled into. About the man who'd saved me and stolen my heart in equal measure. About the choice I was making to walk into darkness with my eyes open. I think you'd like him, Dad, I whispered. He's complicated and dangerous and probably a terrible influence. But he makes me feel safe and seen and like I matter. My father squeezed my hand, a small gesture that meant everything and nothing. The dementia had taken so much of him, but these moments of connection still remained. Fragments of the man who'd raised me to be strong, to be smart, to be myself, regardless of cost. I'm going to be okay, I told him, believing it for the first time. We both are. The next morning, I said goodbye to Angela with an embrace that surprised us both. Take care of him, she said, meaning Roman. He needs someone who sees past what he has to be to who he actually is. I will. And thank you for trusting me with your family. You're part of it now, she said simply, whether you meant to be or not. The drive back to Seattle took 6 hours. I spent them watching Oregon's forests give way to Washington's coastline, thinking about the life I was returning to. Dangerous, complicated, built on foundations of violence and power, but also filled with possibility, with partnership, with a love that had been forged in fire and blood and had somehow survived. Roman was waiting when we arrived at the penthouse. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, and tension in his shoulders. But when he saw me, everything else fell away. He crossed the space in 3 strides, pulling me into his arms like I was oxygen, and he'd been drowning. You came back, he murmured against my hair. I told you I would. People say a lot of things they don't mean. I pulled back to look at him, taking in the face I'd memorized over these intense weeks. I'm not people. I'm your partner. Your equal. The person who's going to help you rebuild this city on something better than corruption and fear. Ambitious. You started this by believing I was worth saving. Let me finish it by proving you right. He kissed me then, deep and sure. A promise and a beginning. Outside, Seattle sprawled beneath us, wounded and healing, dangerous and beautiful. Our city now, our battleground, our home. I'd stumbled into Roman Castellano's life by accident, through a door I'd never meant to open. But standing here in his arms, choosing him and this life with clear eyes and a full heart, I couldn't regret it. Some cages, I realized, were only prisons if you wanted to leave. And I was exactly where I wanted to be. The first month back in Seattle passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Roman's prediction about rebuilding proved accurate. The power vacuum left by the Bratva's collapse created opportunities and dangers in equal measure. Rival organizations circled like sharks scenting blood. Federal investigations required careful navigation. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would rise from the ashes. I found my place in this new reality faster than I'd expected. Roman set me up with equipment that made my old setup look like children's toys. Quantum encryption processors, satellite uplinks, access to databases that technically didn't exist. My role evolved from simple intelligence gathering to strategic planning, identifying threats before they materialized, tracing money flows through increasingly complex networks. We fell into patterns. Mornings working separately, him handling the physical infrastructure of his operations, me diving into digital ones. Afternoons in strategy sessions with his core team, people who'd initially viewed me with suspicion, but gradually came to respect the intelligence I brought. Evenings that belonged only to us, stolen moments of normalcy in a life defined by anything but. Luca became something like a friend, teaching me to shoot at the private range in the building's sub-basement. "Boss would kill me if anything happened to you," he'd said, handing me a Glock. "But he'd kill me slower if you couldn't defend yourself when necessary." The necessity came sooner than any of us wanted. I was working late in Roman's office, our office now, my desk positioned at an angle to his so we could see each other while working, when the security alert chimed. Roman's eyes flicked to the monitor embedded in his desk, his expression hardening instantly. "We have a problem," he said, already reaching for his phone. "Luca, get up here. Now." "What is it?" I asked, trying to see his screen. He turned the monitor so I could view the security feed. 3 cars had pulled up outside the building, disgorging men in suits that screamed organized crime. But not Bratva. The body language was different, more controlled, more Italian. "Friends of yours?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from his expression. "The Salvatoris, New York family." His jaw tightened. "My father did business with them once. It ended badly." Luca appeared in the doorway, weapon already drawn. "How many?" "9 that I can see. Probably more in the building already." Roman stood, moving to the wall safe behind his desk. He extracted 2 handguns, checking them with practiced efficiency. "They're here for a conversation, or they wouldn't have announced themselves so obviously. But conversations with the Salvatoris have a way of turning violent." He handed me one of the guns. I took it automatically, muscle memory from Luca's training kicking in. The weight felt foreign and familiar all at once. What do they want? What everyone wants. Territory. Tribute. Submission. Roman's voice was cold. The man I'd fallen in love with retreating behind the mask of the crime lord he needed to be. The Bratva's collapse left Seattle open. Every family with ambition thinks they can claim it. The elevator chimed. Roman positioned himself between it and me, Luca flanking his left side. When the doors opened, 5 men stepped out, led by someone who radiated authority the way Roman did. Innate, absolute, dangerous. He was older than Roman by perhaps 20 years, silver threading through his dark hair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car. His eyes swept the room, cataloging threats with the efficiency of long practice, before settling on Roman with something that might have been respect. "Castellano," he said, his accent thick with Brooklyn origins. "You're harder to get an audience with than the Pope." "Salvatore," Roman replied, his tone neutral. "I don't recall inviting you to Seattle." "No invitation needed. This is business, not a social call." The older man's gaze slid to me, lingering with interest that made my skin crawl. "And who's this? New acquisition?" "My partner," Roman said, the emphasis on the last word carrying warning. "Riley Thompson, the one responsible for bringing down the Bratva's network." Something flickered in Salvatore's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or calculation. The hacker. We'd heard rumors, didn't realize Castellano had claimed her already. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Smart move. Control the information. Control the game. "Riley isn't controlled by anyone," Roman said quietly, dangerously. "She chooses to be here." Important distinction. The tension in the room thickened, violence hovering just beneath the surface of civility. I understood instinctively that we were balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong word, one misinterpreted gesture, and this would explode into bloodshed. "Gentlemen," I said, my voice cutting through the standoff. "Mr. Salvatore came here to talk business. Perhaps we should let him state his purpose before anyone starts measuring their masculinity through firepower." Luca made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Roman's expression didn't change, but I felt his approval through the subtle shift in his posture. Salvatore's eyebrows rose, genuine amusement replacing the calculated threat. "She's got spine," he observed. "Your father would have liked her, Castellano." "My father would have protected her," Roman corrected, "as I do. Now state your business, Salvatore. My patience has limits." The older man gestured to his men, who relaxed fractionally but didn't holster their weapons. "Simple proposition. Seattle is too valuable to leave in the hands of one family, especially one still rebuilding from the Bratva War. The Commission has decided this territory should be shared. Partnership, not conquest. The Commission doesn't dictate terms in my city." "Your city?" Salvatore's smile sharpened. "Your father held Seattle through arrangements with families across the country. Agreements that died with him. You've operated independently for 10 years, Castellano. That was fine when you were small, regional. But you've gotten ambitious. The Bratva takedown put you on everyone's radar. Now the Commission wants assurances you're not building an empire that threatens the stability we've all worked to maintain." I could feel Roman's fury, tightly leashed, but palpable. This was a power play disguised as diplomacy. The old guard asserting dominance over someone they saw as an upstart, testing whether Roman would bend or break under pressure. "What kind of assurances?" I asked before Roman could refuse outright. Salvatore's attention swung back to me. "Smart and tactical. Castellano, you've chosen well." He pulled out a folded document from his inner jacket pocket. "Standard partnership agreement. The Castellanos maintain operational control of Seattle, but they pay tribute to the Commission quarterly. 20% of legitimate business proceeds, 10% of everything else. In exchange, they receive protection. No more threats like the Bratva, no encroachment from other families, access to national networks." "And if we refuse?" Roman's voice was ice. "Then Seattle becomes disputed territory. Every family with ambition takes a shot at claiming it. The Bratva War will look like a minor skirmish compared to what comes next." Salvatore set the document on Roman's desk. "I'm not your enemy, Castellano. I'm offering you stability, security, the chance to build without constantly watching your back. At the cost of independence. At the cost of isolation," Salvatore corrected. "Your father understood this. The only reason he resisted was pride, and look where that got him. The words were cruel, deliberately so." You're smarter than he was. Prove it." Roman's hand tightened on his gun, and for a terrible moment I thought he would shoot Salvatore right there. The older man seemed to sense it too, his own men tensing. But I stepped forward, placing myself between them. Not blocking Roman, just claiming space in the conversation. "Mr. Salvatore, I appreciate the offer," I said carefully. "But you're asking us to decide something this significant under implicit threat. That's not negotiation. That's extortion." "Business and extortion are often indistinguishable, Miss Thompson." "Perhaps. But good business allows for due diligence. We need time to review your terms, consult with our own advisors, ensure we understand exactly what we're agreeing to." I met his gaze steadily. "Give us 72 hours. If your offer is as mutually beneficial as you claim, it will survive scrutiny." Salvatore studied me for a long moment, something like approval flickering in his eyes. 3 days. After that, the commission expects an answer. Choose wisely, Castellano. Your father's stubbornness cost him everything. Don't let history repeat itself." He collected his document from the desk, a deliberate message that he expected us to examine it thoroughly, and gestured to his men. They filed back into the elevator with the same controlled precision they'd arrived with. When the doors closed, the tension in the room finally broke. Roman moved immediately, pulling me against him with enough force to drive the air from my lungs. His heart hammered against my chest, adrenaline still flooding his system. "Don't ever put yourself between me and an enemy again." "He wasn't going to shoot me," I said, though my own hands trembled now that the danger had passed. Too many witnesses, too messy. But he might have shot you if I hadn't intervened. "Let him try." Roman pulled back enough to look at me, fury and fear warring in his expression. "Riley, if anything happened to you..." "Nothing happened, and now we have 3 days to figure out our response." I touched his face, grounding us both. "Talk to me. What aren't you saying about Salvatore?" He exhaled slowly, the control returning gradually. "He's not lying about my father. The commission approached him about partnership 20 years ago. Same terms, same threats. My father refused. 6 months later, he was dead." "You think Salvatore killed him?" "I think the commission sanctioned it." Roman moved to the windows, his refuge in moments of stress. The official story was the Bratva, and maybe they pulled the trigger. But the timing was too convenient. My father refuses to pay tribute. Suddenly his enemies get bolder. His protection evaporates. He dies in a way that can't be directly traced to any one family. The pieces fell into place. This isn't just about territory. It's personal. Everything is always personal. He pressed his palm against the glass, looking out at the city lights. Salvatore was my father's friend once. They trained together, ran operations side by side when they were young. Then the commission formed, and Salvatore chose ambition over loyalty, became one of their enforcers, probably gave the order himself. Can you prove it? No, and that's the problem. If I refuse the commission's offer, I'm painting a target on my back, on our backs, without concrete justification. Just the suspicion of a son who can't let go of the past. His reflection in the glass looked haunted. But if I agree, I'm validating what they did, letting them profit from my father's murder. I went to him, wrapping my arms around his waist from behind, pressing my forehead against his back. Then we find a third option, one that doesn't require you to surrender or die. There is no third option with the commission, Riley. That's how they maintain power. Force everyone into binary choices where they win either way. You're forgetting what I do best. I turned him to face me. I find information people want hidden. I trace connections through digital noise. If there's evidence linking Salvatore to your father's death, I can find it. In 3 days? I've done more with less time. I kissed him softly. Trust me. Let me do what you brought me here for. Something shifted in his expression. Hope, maybe. Or the dangerous possibility of revenge. If you find proof, really find it, everything changes. We won't just refuse the commission. We'll tear them apart from the inside. One problem at a time, I cautioned. First, we find the truth. Then we decide what to do with it. The next 72 hours were the most intense of my life. I barely slept, living on coffee and adrenaline as I dove into archives I had no legal right to access. FBI databases, Interpol files, digitized police records from 20 years ago. The Castellano family's own intelligence network, meticulously maintained by Angela. Roman worked beside me when he could, cross-referencing my findings with his own memories and the physical evidence his father had left behind. We built a timeline, the commission's initial approach, his father's refusal, the escalating incidents that followed. A warehouse fire, shipments intercepted, allies suddenly unwilling to do business. And through it all, one name kept appearing in the margins. Salvatore. Not as the primary actor, but as the coordinator. The man who smoothed over conflicts, who negotiated compromises, who maintained the commission's unified front. He was playing both sides, I said on the third night, pointing to a pattern I'd identified in encrypted communications I'd managed to decode. Publicly, he supported your father's independence, argued for giving the Castellanos more time to accept the partnership. But privately, he was feeding the Bratva information about your family's operations, setting up the circumstances for them to strike. Roman leaned in, reading the decoded messages with growing intensity. This is it. This proves he orchestrated the whole thing. It proves he facilitated it, I corrected. But the message that actually authorized your father's death, I can't find it. Either it was never digital, or it's been scrubbed from every database I can access. What about the Bratva's side? They kept records. They did. I pulled up another screen, showing files we'd recovered during the original takedown. But they're coded. References to the old man and the Roman problem without names. Could be your father. Could be someone else. It's him, Roman said with certainty. The timeline matches perfectly. We worked through the night, building a case that was circumstantial, but damning. By the time Salvatore's deadline arrived, we had enough to create reasonable doubt about the commission's intentions, but not enough to prove Salvatore's guilt beyond question. Roman called a meeting at neutral territory, a restaurant Angela owned, closed for the evening, with enough of Roman's people positioned throughout to discourage any violent surprises. Salvatore arrived with his same contingent, his expression unreadable as he took in the preparations. Castellano, he greeted, sliding into the booth Roman indicated. I hope we're here to finalize our partnership. We're here to discuss terms, Roman replied, but not the ones you proposed. Salvatore's eyes narrowed fractionally. The commission doesn't negotiate its standard agreements. Then perhaps the commission should know that its representative has been less than forthcoming about his history with my family. Roman slid a tablet across the table, showing the evidence we'd compiled. 20 years ago, you helped orchestrate my father's death, fed information to his enemies, created the circumstances that led to his assassination, all while pretending to be his friend. The older man's face remained impassive as he reviewed the information, but I saw the calculation behind his eyes. These are allegations without proof, coincidences and conspiracy theories. Enough coincidences to make the commission question your loyalties, I interjected, and enough to make other families wonder if you've been playing similar games with them. How much of the commission's power depends on trust, Mr. Salvatore? What happens when that trust evaporates? You're threatening me? His voice was soft, dangerous. We're offering you a choice, Roman said. The same binary you offered us. Option 1. You go back to the commission and report that the Castellanos have refused partnership. We release this information simultaneously. Let the families draw their own conclusions about your reliability. That's suicide for both of us. Perhaps. Or perhaps the families are tired of the commission's control. Perhaps they've been looking for an excuse to restructure the power dynamics. Roman leaned forward. Option 2. You go back and report that the Castellanos have negotiated a modified agreement. 10% tribute instead of 30%, paid directly to you as regional coordinator, bypassing the commission's distribution network. Understanding dawned in Salvatore's expression. You want me to skim from the commission. We want you to have skin in our game, I clarified. If you're profiting from Seattle's success independently, you have incentive to protect us, rather than exploit us. And if the commission ever discovers the arrangement, you're the one who takes the fall, not us. It was brilliant and ruthless, exactly the kind of strategy Roman's father might have used. We were turning Salvatore's betrayal of the past into leverage for the present, forcing him to choose between his loyalty to the commission and his own self-interest. Salvatore studied us both for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he smiled, genuine this time, almost admiring. Your father really would have liked you both. He always said the future belonged to people who could think 3 moves ahead. He picked up the tablet, deleting the files with a few swipes. Modified agreement, 10%, paid quarterly to an account I'll designate. If the commission asks, you're paying the full 30%, and I'm managing the distribution. And if they audit, they won't. I've been their treasurer for 15 years. They trust me. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. But if they do, I disappear. You know nothing. Clean hands. Roman extended his hand across the table. Deal. They shook, the gesture sealing an alliance built on mutual benefit and mutual threat. When Salvatore left with his men, Roman pulled me into his arms, exhaustion and relief flooding through both of us. We did it, I whispered. We actually did it. You did it, he corrected. Your plan. Your leverage. I just provided the context. Partners, I reminded him. That's what we are. He kissed me there in the empty restaurant, surrounded by the evidence of our small victory. We'd faced down the commission and survived, turned an enemy into an unwilling ally, bought ourselves time and independence. But as we drove back to the penthouse through Seattle's glittering streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd just delayed the inevitable rather than prevented it. The commission wouldn't forgive this defiance forever. Salvatore wouldn't stay bought indefinitely. The web we'd woven around ourselves was complex and fragile, held together by threats and compromises that could unravel at any moment. What are you thinking? Roman asked, reading my silence correctly. That this is never going to end, I admitted. The threats, the negotiations, the constant calculation. We'll always be looking over our shoulders. Yes, he agreed simply. That's the life I'm offering you. The one you chose when you came back from Oregon. I know. I laced my fingers through his. And I'd choose it again. But sometimes I wonder what we're building toward. What the endgame looks like. Survival, he said. Safety for the people we protect. A world where we don't have to compromise everything we are just to stay alive. He squeezed my hand. And maybe eventually, something that looks like peace. It was the most optimistic I'd ever heard him sound, and also the saddest. Because we both knew peace was a luxury people like us rarely achieved. But we could fight for it, could build toward it one negotiation, one victory, one day at a time. The penthouse welcomed us back with its familiar quiet, our sanctuary in the storm. We shed the day's tension along with our clothes, finding comfort in each other's arms. In the reminder that whatever battles we fought outside, here we were safe. Here we were whole. I love you, Roman murmured against my skin, the words still new enough to carry weight. For choosing this. For choosing me. Always, I promised, meaning it with every fiber of my being. Whatever comes next, we face it together. And in that moment, tangled together in the darkness with Seattle's lights flickering beyond our windows, I believed we could survive anything. The web we'd built might be fragile, but it was ours. And we'd defend it with everything we had. 6 months after the Salvatore negotiation, Seattle settled into an uneasy equilibrium. Roman's empire expanded carefully, filling the vacuum left by the Bratva with legitimate businesses that masked the less legal operations beneath. I became his digital architect, building systems that protected our interests while tracking threats before they materialized. We were powerful, cautious, and increasingly visible, which made us targets. The warning came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was running my usual route through Capitol Hill, no longer alone, never alone anymore, with one of Roman's security team maintaining a discreet distance. When my phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Angela. "Need you at the estate. Now, don't tell Roman yet." My stomach dropped. Angela never excluded her brother from anything operational. Whatever this was, it was personal and dangerous enough that she wanted me to see it first. I diverted to the parking garage where Luca was waiting, showing him the message without explanation. "Boss won't like this," he observed, already starting the engine. "Boss doesn't need to know until we understand what we're dealing with." I buckled in, adrenaline overriding the exhaustion from my run. Drive fast. The Oregon estate looked peaceful in the early spring sunshine. Daffodils blooming along the drive, the forest green and alive. But inside the main house, Angela's expression destroyed any illusion of calm. She was in her office, door closed, laptop open to surveillance footage that made my blood run cold. "When?" I asked, not needing to ask what. 3 hours ago, Portland Airport. She replayed the video. 4 men, Russian accents according to the TSA agent who processed them. They used fake IDs, but facial recognition matched them to known Bratva operatives. The organization we thought we destroyed? We only killed the local branch. On screen, 4 men moved through the terminal with the casual confidence of people who knew they were untouchable. One of them, young, blonde, cold-eyed, looked directly at the security camera and smiled. A message for anyone who might be watching. "They know where we are," I said numbly. "Worse, they know where your father is." Angela pulled up another window, showing security logs from the care facility. "Someone tried to access his wing last night. Our people intercepted them, but it was close. Too close." The room tilted slightly. My father, who'd never asked for any of this, who existed in his own clouded reality, was a target because of choices I'd made, because I'd stolen files and fallen in love with a man whose world was violence. "We need to move him again," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "To where, Riley? We've already relocated him twice. The Bratva has resources across the country. They've had 6 months to rebuild, to plan, to identify every vulnerability." Angela's frustration was evident. They want revenge for what we did to their Seattle operation, and they've decided the best revenge is destroying everything you and Roman care about. Does he know? I called you first, but we need to tell him, now. The drive back to Seattle felt eternal. Angela came with us, Luca pushing the car to speeds that should have terrified me but barely registered. My mind was racing through scenarios, calculations, probabilities. The Bratva had learned from their mistakes. They weren't coming with brute force this time. They were playing a longer game, picking off our vulnerabilities one by one. Roman was in a meeting when we arrived, something with port authorities about shipping contracts. Angela interrupted without apology, ushering me into the conference room where Roman's expression transformed from irritation to alarm the moment he saw my face. "Everyone out," he ordered, his voice cutting through the room's chatter. "Now." The port officials filed out quickly, sensing the shift in atmosphere. When the door closed, Angela laid out everything. The Bratva operatives, the attempt on my father, the systematic pattern of surveillance that suggested this was just the opening move of a larger operation. Roman listened without interruption, his face becoming progressively more still, more dangerous. When Angela finished, the silence stretched for several heartbeats before he spoke. "How long have you known about the surveillance?" 2 weeks, Angela admitted. "I was trying to identify the extent before involving you both. I thought we had more time." "You thought wrong." Roman's tone was ice. "Riley, pack a bag. We're moving you to the secondary safe house tonight. Luca, double security on the estate, rotate teams every 6 hours, no patterns they can track." "Angela, no," I interrupted. Everyone turned to stare at me. Roman's eyebrows rose fractionally. "No? I'm not hiding again. Not running to another safe house while you handle this." I moved around the table to face him directly. "That's exactly what they want. To separate us, make us predictable, pick us off individually. We're stronger together, Roman. You know that." "What I know is that you're the primary target," he said, his control slipping enough to reveal the fear underneath. "They can't hurt me directly, so they're coming after what I love, and I will not—" His voice caught, reset. "I will not watch you die because you're too stubborn to accept protection." "I'm not refusing protection. I'm refusing to be passive." I took his hands, forcing him to look at me. "You've trained me for 6 months. Shooting, tactics, reading situations. Let me use that training. Let me be the partner I've claimed to be, instead of another asset you have to safeguard." "Riley's right," Angela said quietly. "Hiding her just delays the inevitable. We need to go on offense." Roman pulled away, pacing to the window. Always the window, his thinking space. I could see the war happening inside him. Calculation versus emotion. Strategy versus the desperate need to keep me safe. "What do you propose?" he asked finally, not looking at me. "We use me as bait," I said, the plan crystallizing as I spoke. "Let the Bratva think they have an opening. I go back to my old apartment." "Absolutely not. Hear me out. We make it look like I've left you, that we fought, that I'm scared, that I'm vulnerable. They'll come for me because I'm an easy target. But it's a trap. Your people positioned throughout the building, full surveillance, controlled environment. When they make their move, we take them alive. Find out who sent them, where the orders are coming from, how extensive their rebuilt network is. You're asking me to dangle you in front of killers and trust that we can stop them in time." "I'm asking you to trust me," I corrected, "and your team, and the systems we've built together." Angela nodded slowly. "It could work. The apartment building is defendable. We'd have every advantage. And if we take some of them alive, we can finally cut the head off the snake instead of just swatting at branches." Roman turned from the window and the look in his eyes was terrible. Not anger, but fear so profound it was almost grief. "If this goes wrong—" "It won't," I said with more confidence than I felt. "Because you'll be there, and we don't fail each other." 3 days later, I moved back into my old Capitol Hill apartment. It had sat empty since that first terrible night, preserved like a crime scene, bloodstains scrubbed from the floors, but the bullet holes still in the walls. Roman had insisted on keeping it, paying the rent, maintaining it as a safe house backup. Now it became the stage for our trap. We made the break public and ugly. A screaming fight in a restaurant where Roman's enemies would definitely hear about it. Me throwing wine, him cold and dismissive, the whole neighborhood convinced that the hacker and the crime lord had imploded spectacularly. I moved back home with a single suitcase, playing the role of the frightened girl who'd realized too late what world she'd entered. The Bratva took the bait faster than we'd expected. The first surveillance team showed up within 24 hours. We watched them through our own cameras, cataloging faces, tracking movements. They were professionals, careful, patient, gathering intelligence before committing to action. Roman had 8 people positioned throughout the building, disguised as residents, maintenance workers, delivery drivers. I was never actually alone, even when it looked like I was, but the act required commitment. I spent my days working on my laptop, visible through the windows, looking increasingly nervous and isolated. I went for runs alone, though Luca shadowed me from 3 blocks back. I ordered takeout, went to the grocery store, lived a simulacrum of my old life while the Bratva watched and planned. Roman was going insane. He stayed at the penthouse during the day, maintaining the illusion of our separation. But he showed up at the apartment every night after dark, using the fire escape to avoid the front entrance. Those nights were the only time either of us could breathe. "This was a terrible plan," he said on the 4th night, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. "Every instinct I have is screaming to extract you from this situation." 2 more days, I murmured against his chest. "They're getting bolder. Made direct contact with a neighbor today, asking questions about me. They're close to moving. And when they do, then we end this." I pulled back to look at him. "One way or another, this ends." He kissed me like he was memorizing the taste of my lips, the feel of my body against his. When he finally left just before dawn, I watched him disappear down the fire escape and wondered if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Not falling in love with him. That was inevitable the moment he'd crashed into my bedroom with death at his heels. But asking him to use me as bait, to watch me play vulnerable when every fiber of his being was built to protect. The break came on the 6th day. I was making coffee when the apartment door exploded inward. Not picked or forced, blown open with professional efficiency. 3 men rushed in, weapons drawn, moving with the precision of military training. I dropped the mug, letting it shatter, playing terrified as they converged on me. "Riley Thompson," the blonde one from the airport footage said, his accent thick. "You've been very difficult to find." "Please," I whispered, backing toward the bedroom. "I don't have anything anymore. I gave everything to Castellano. I'm nobody." "You're the one who destroyed our Seattle operation," he corrected, following me with his gun raised. "Killed our people, cost us millions. Nobody? No, Miss Thompson. You're the example we make." I stumbled backward into the bedroom, hands raised, tears streaming down my face. The performance of my life, selling fear and helplessness while my mind counted seconds. They'd be cautious, sweep the apartment for traps, position themselves before. The blonde grabbed my arm, yanking me forward with brutal efficiency. His gun pressed against my temple, cold and final. "Tell Castellano." The window behind him exploded inward. Roman came through the glass like an avenging angel, weapon firing before his feet touched the floor. The blonde released me on instinct, turning toward the new threat, which was exactly the wrong move. I dropped low, rolling toward the bed where I'd hidden my own gun beneath the mattress. Grabbed it, came up firing at the second operative who was swinging his weapon toward Roman. Chaos erupted. Luca and 2 others crashed through the front door. The 3rd Bratva operative fired wildly, catching one of Roman's men in the shoulder. Angela appeared from the closet. She'd been hiding there for hours, taking down the 3rd operative with a shot to his leg. 90 seconds from entry to surrender. The blonde on his knees, bleeding from a shoulder wound, hands cuffed behind him. The other 2 subdued and secured. My apartment destroyed again, but this time we were standing, victorious, in control. Roman pulled me against him immediately, his hands running over me, checking for injuries with trembling fingers. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you? Riley, answer me." "I'm fine," I managed, still shaking from adrenaline. "It worked. We got them." "Don't ever ask me to do this again," he said fiercely. "Don't ever make me watch you in danger like this. I can't." I won't survive it. You won't have to. I cupped his face, forcing him to focus. This is the end of it. We have them. We can finish this. Angela was already on her phone, calling in their cleanup crew. Lucas secured the prisoners, checking the blonde's wound with clinical efficiency. The man spat blood and curses in Russian, glaring at me with pure hatred. You think this changes anything? He snarled in accented English. We are Bratva. We don't forget. We don't forgive. More will come. Always more. Then we'll be ready, Roman said coldly, turning to face him. And each time you come, we'll be stronger. Better prepared. You picked the wrong city to rebuild in, the wrong people to threaten. Tell your bosses, if they come for Seattle again, they won't just lose an operation. They'll lose everything. We extracted everything the prisoners knew over the next 48 hours. Not through torture. Roman's methods were more subtle, more psychological, but effective. Names, locations, operational structures. The Bratva had indeed been rebuilding, but smaller, more cautious, operating out of Vancouver and Portland rather than risking Seattle directly. Until they'd decided revenge was worth the risk. Roman and Angela used the intelligence to systematically dismantle what remained of the organization's Pacific Northwest network. Not publicly this time. No media exposure, no dramatic takedowns. Just quiet, efficient elimination of assets and personnel. Within a month, the Bratva's West Coast operations had collapsed entirely. Survivors fleeing back to Eastern Europe or going to ground so deep they'd never resurface. My father remained safe at the Oregon estate, his care now permanent, his existence peaceful despite the chaos that had swirled around him. I visited monthly, sitting with him in the garden, telling him stories about my life that he wouldn't remember, but that I needed to share anyway. I found someone, I told him during one visit, holding his hand as daffodils bloomed around us. Someone who sees all of me, the good parts and the broken parts and the dangerous parts, and chooses me anyway. I think you'd approve. He's complicated and intense, and he loves me like it's a religion. My father squeezed my hand, that small gesture that meant everything. And for just a moment his eyes cleared, focusing on me with recognition that stole my breath. Happy? He asked, the words slurred but unmistakable. Yes, I whispered. So happy, Dad. The moment passed, his gaze clouding again, but it was enough. It was everything. 1 year after that terrible night when my door first exploded inward, Roman and I stood in his office, our office, looking out at Seattle's evening lights. The city had become truly ours in ways I'd never imagined. Not through conquest or fear, but through careful cultivation of power and influence. I have something for you, Roman said, pulling me away from the window. He reached into his desk drawer and extracted a small box, setting it between us with careful ceremony. Roman. It's not what you think, he said quickly. I mean, it might be, eventually, but that's not... He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly uncertain in a way I'd never seen. Just open it. Inside the box was a laptop. Not just any laptop, my original one from that first night, the one I'd thought lost forever in the chaos. But it had been restored, upgraded, every file recovered and protected. You kept it, I breathed, pulling it out with trembling hands. All this time. I retrieved it the next morning, sent it to the best recovery specialists in the country. He moved closer, his hand covering mine. Everything you built before you met me, your work, your photos, your memories, it's all there. I wanted you to have it back, to know that choosing this life didn't mean losing who you were before. Tears blurred my vision as I opened the laptop, seeing familiar files and folders, years of my life preserved and protected. This must have cost a fortune. Worth every penny. He pulled out the other item from the box, A passport, Canadian, with my photo, but a name I didn't recognize. And this, your freedom. Valid, verified, complete with financial accounts and an identity history that would pass any scrutiny. Vancouver's beautiful this time of year. You could disappear, start fresh. Be anyone you wanted to be. I stared at the passport, understanding flooding through me. You're giving me a choice, a real one. I'm giving you what I should have given you from the beginning. His voice was rough with emotion. The option to walk away. No obligations, no threats, no manipulation. Just a clean exit if that's what you want. And if I don't want it, then you stay. Not because you have to, not because you're trapped, but because you choose to. Because this life, dangerous and complicated and violent as it is where you want to be. I set the passport down carefully, then closed the laptop and set it aside too. Both precious gifts, both paths to different futures, but only one future mattered. I choose you, I said simply. Not the power, not the security, not even the protection. You, Roman Castellano, the man who saved my life and then gave me reasons to live it. The man who watches me like I'm something precious and trusts me like I'm something strong. The man who would let me walk away, even though it would destroy him. His control shattered. He kissed me with desperate intensity, hands tangling in my hair, body pressing mine against the desk. When we finally broke apart, both gasping, his forehead rested against mine. I love you, he said. More than power, more than revenge, more than anything I've ever wanted. You're the only thing in my life that isn't calculated or strategic or part of some larger plan. You're just everything. I love you too. I kissed him softly. And I'm not going anywhere. This is my life now. Our life. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Together, he agreed, the word a vow. Outside, Seattle glittered in the darkness, our city, our kingdom, our home. The journey from that first terrible night to this moment had been violent, chaotic, transformative. I'd lost my old life and gained something I'd never expected. Partnership, purpose, belonging in a world I'd never known existed. The files that had started everything sat encrypted on servers across the country. Insurance against threats that might still emerge. The Bratva was broken, but not destroyed. Evil never fully died, just retreated and regrouped. The commission watched from New York, our arrangement with Salvatore holding but fragile. Danger would always exist at the edges of our lives. But we'd survived. More than that, we'd built something worth protecting. Roman pulled me back into his arms, and I let myself sink into his embrace, into the certainty of his love, into the dangerous, beautiful life we'd chosen together. The encrypted files had brought us together. The violence had forged us. But love had made us unbreakable. No regrets? He asked, echoing his question from that first night we'd spent together. I looked up at him, at the man who'd crashed into my life with death at his heels and given me reasons to live. The man who'd manipulated and protected me in equal measure, who'd killed for me and would die for me, who'd finally given me the freedom to choose him without obligation. No regrets, I said firmly, not a single one. He smiled then, that rare, genuine smile reserved only for me, and kissed me as Seattle's lights blazed around us, witnesses to our strange and violent and perfect love story. The door I'd stumbled through that night had led to darkness, but in that darkness, I'd found light, found purpose, found home, and I would defend it with everything I had, for as long as we both lived, together, always together.